Hey, this is Richie from the Fan of Football 813 YouTube channel. I'm doing my previews. I just finished my reviews. We'll throw them up. But I'm going to start with my previews for week 2 of college football. The first game, Friday, TCU takes on SMU. Both teams have good offenses. TCU, Sean Robinson, quarterback. He had a really good first game this year. SMU, Ben Hicks at quarterback. He's one of the best group of 5 quarterbacks, statistically anyway. It should be a bit of a shootout, but I think TCU will take that one. New Mexico Lobos, they take on the Wisconsin Badgers. Wisconsin, they have one of the best running backs in the country in Jonathan Taylor. He ran for 145 and 2 touchdowns in that first game. He's a Heisman candidate for sure. New Mexico, they looked really good in their first game. They dropped 62. They had over 300 passing and rushing yards each in that first game. They have a new coordinator, so they have a more balanced offense. New Mexico could keep it interesting for a while, but I'm going with Wisconsin for that. I think they win that one. Western Michigan Broncos facing the Michigan Wolverines. Michigan had a tough first game against Notre Dame. They lost 24-17. Their quarterback Shea Patterson for Michigan, he had an okay game. He wasn't great. Western Michigan lost their first game in Syracuse, but they put up a bunch of points. Their quarterback, John Westing, passed for 379, 3 touchdowns. That could be an interesting game. Western Michigan could go in there and surprise Michigan, but I think Michigan will take that. The next game is an interesting non-conference matchup between the Mississippi State Bulldogs from the SEC taking on the Kansas State Wildcats from the Big 12. Mississippi State, they had a great first game. They dropped 63 under new head coach. Kansas State struggled against Winnable, but Bill Snyder, the coach for Kansas State, who's been there for 30 years now, he always has them ready to go. So don't sleep on Kansas State. I'm going with the Bulldogs for that one from Mississippi State, but that's one to keep an eye on. 1AA Towson takes on the Wake Forest Demon Deacons. Wake Forest, they should win that one. It's kind of a tune-up. Wake Forest, their freshman quarterback Sam Hartman passed for 378 and 2 touchdowns in his first game against Tulane. So I think Wake Forest should take that. Eastern Michigan Eagles from the MAC, they're facing Purdue Boilermakers from the Big Ten. Eastern Michigan 2 years ago made a bowl. Last year they just missed out on one. Historically, EMU is not a very good team. Purdue is normally a pretty good team in the Big Ten. The last few years they weren't great. They made a bowl last year though, for Purdue did. Their offense looked pretty good last year. Eastern Michigan's got a shot, but I think Purdue should handle them pretty well. Liberty, the Liberty Flames are moving up to 1A, but they have one of the best quarterbacks maybe in the country, Stephen Buckshot Calvert. Yes, his nickname is Buckshot. He had over 3,000 yards last year. Antonio Golden is their wide receiver. He had over 1,000 yards. Army, they're taking on the Army West Point Black Knights, who's a triple option team, which means they run it a lot. They're usually one of the top teams in the nation running it. That should be an interesting game. I went with Army on that one, but that was a tough one for me. The next game at noon, Nevada Wolfpack from the Mountain West. They take on the Vanderbilt Commodores from the SEC. Vanderbilt should not look past them. Nevada dropped 72 last week. They have a good passing offense. They can move it all over the field. Ty Ganji, the quarterback for Nevada, passed for 342 and 3 touchdowns. Vanderbilt, that'll be a tough game. I went with Vanderbilt in this game, but Nevada could come out with that one. Another interesting game, Arizona Wildcats take on the Houston Cougars. Arizona Wildcats, they were upset the first game by BYU. Their quarterback Khalil Tate did not play very well. Houston's quarterback De'Aaron King did play well in their first game last week. He passed for 323 touchdowns. I picked Arizona. This one could go either way. Houston, with the way Arizona looked, Houston could come out with this one. But I have my faith in Khalil Tate. But this is his last shot. So I'm going to go with Arizona there. All right, a competition between the smart schools. The Duke Blue Devils take on the Northwestern Wildcats. Duke has a good quarterback in Daniel Jones. Passed for 187 and a touchdown. Northwestern, they have a pretty good quarterback too in Clayton Thorson. But Jeremy Larkin, the running back for Northwestern, was the talk of their first game. He ran for 143 and 2 touchdowns. This is a very even game. I picked Duke. I'm not sure how I feel about that after talking about it, but you know what? I picked Duke. That'll be a close one. That'll be good. The Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets from the ACC taking on the USF Bulls, the South Florida Bulls in my hometown, Tampa. Georgia Tech has that running game. They can run for 300, 400 yards. That first game, they ran for over 400. That's a tough offense to stop. USF had a solid first game. Quarterback Blake Barnett, who transferred in, he threw for 305 yards, 3 touchdowns, ran for a touchdown. He looked good. The defense for USF, they struggled tackling. Georgia Tech is a good team. You don't want to struggle tackling against them. Georgia Tech could very well run all over USF. That may be one of the better games from the noon games to watch, though. I picked Georgia Tech, but I'm gonna root for USF. I hope I get that one wrong. Angela can have that win if USF wins. The next game, the Georgia State Panthers will face the NC State Wolfpack. Georgia State struggled against a 1AA team last week, but so did NC State, who is one of the better teams in the ACC. NC State struggled against 1AA James Madison. Georgia State has got a chance, but I think NC State should win this one. The next game, the UCLA Bruins face the Oklahoma Sooners. UCLA was upset the first week by the Cincinnati Bearcats. UCLA's offense did not look very good, which is interesting because their coach, Chip Kelly, he's known for offense. Oklahoma, they dropped 63 on Florida Atlantic last week. Their quarterback, Kyler Murray, he looked really good. I'm going to go with Oklahoma with this. I think Kyler Murray passed for 209. The receiver for Oklahoma had 133 yards receiving. I think Oklahoma wins. 1AA Holy Cross is taking on the Boston College Eagles from the ACC. I think Boston College wins this. Their quarterback Anthony Brown had 4 touchdown passes in that first game. I think they win. 1AA William and Mary will take on Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech hosts Okies. It's kind of a tune-up game. There's not a ton to say with that. 1AA Portland State takes on the Oregon Ducks, one of the best offenses in the country. Quarterback Justin Herbert or Herbert, whichever you say. He had 5 touchdown passes in that first game for Oregon as they dropped 58. That should not be close. Oregon could have 58 by halftime. Who knows? The Air Force Falcons takes on the Florida Atlantic Owls. And this is an interesting game. Air Force is a triple option offense. They're tough to stop. Florida Atlantic, they have a really good running back in Devin Singletary, who last season ran for 1,920 yards and 32 rushing touchdowns. The NCAA record is 39 for a season. So this should be a pretty good game. FAU did not look good against Oklahoma, but Oklahoma could be the best team in the country. Who knows? I think Florida Atlantic bounces back though, and I'm going with Florida Atlantic this one. That should be a pretty even game. All right, the Kansas Jayhawks facing the Central Michigan Chippewas. The Kansas Jayhawks lost their first game against 1AA team. Central Michigan almost upset, a minor upset, Kentucky from the SEC. The Central Michigan team, they have a tall quarterback, Tony Poljan, 6'7", 6'7" or 6'6" or some shit like that. Uh, the quarterback for Kansas had a decent first game. Until Kansas wins, though, I'm actually going to go with Central Michigan for this one. They're one of the better teams in the MAC. The next game after that, the Arkansas State Red Wolves take on the Alabama Crimson Tide. The Crimson Tide should win. I know most people watching, that won't be close. Arkansas State, their quarterback, Justin Hansen, he was a Sooner quarterback. He was in Oklahoma quarterback a few years ago. Last year, he threw for 3,900 yards and 37 touchdown passes. The first game this year, so he threw for 423 yards and 6 touchdowns in that first game. So they have the kind of offense that could scare Alabama. It would be a pretty big upset. I'm gonna say Alabama wins, but maybe look to that game to be close for a little while anyway. Maybe the first quarter or maybe the first half, but Alabama should end up winning pretty handedly. One of the games of the day, the Georgia Bulldogs takes on the South Carolina Gamecocks, both SEC East teams. Georgia's highly ranked, but both have good quarterbacks. Jake Fromm for Georgia, Jake Bentley for South Carolina. The running backs are both good for both teams. This is a really interesting game. I'm picking Georgia, but this could be one of the upsets. This could very well be. This could come down to the end. South Carolina could come out with this, but I'm going to go with Georgia. The Rutgers Scarlet Knights, they take on Ohio State Buckeyes. Rutgers had a solid first game. They put up 35 in their game, but Ohio State, under the first-time starter of Dwayne Haskins, all they did was drop 77. So I can't go. And Dwayne Haskins had 5 touchdown passes and 313 yards. So I got Ohio State for this one. Ball State, they took on a 1LA team last year. They dropped 42 points. They're taking on Notre Dame. Notre Dame looked pretty good on defense against Michigan. Ball State has a pretty decent offense. There could be a potential upset here, but I'm going with Notre Dame. I think they take it. But Riley Neal, the quarterback for Ball State, passed for 259, 2 touchdowns. James Gilbert, the running back for Ball State, ran for 100 yards last week and a touchdown. And Ball State's got 2,000-yard rushers on their team. So who knows? Maybe they give Notre Dame some fits. Colorado Buffaloes against the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Nebraska was one of the games that was canceled last week due to weather, so I'm not sure how Nebraska will look under new coach Scott Frost. I expect them to do well, but Steven Montez, the quarterback for Colorado, his first game, even though it was Colorado State for the Mountain West, his first game, he 22 of 25, 338, 4 touchdowns. He was amazing. That will be tough to stop. I ended up going with Colorado, but that game is I'm interested to see that one, to see how Scott Frost does in his first game, and to see if Colorado may be for real. The Buffalo Bulls take on the Temple Owls. This is interesting because Buffalo, they went 6-6 last year in the MAC. Temple won 7 games last year in a bowl. Buffalo has one of the best wide receivers in the country, in Anthony Johnson. But Temple lost last week to 1AA. And the Buffalo Bulls, they beat their 1AA opponent last week. They hung up 48. The quarterback for Buffalo, Tyree Jackson, had 6 touchdown passes last week. Watch out for Temple. I'm actually going to pick Buffalo in this game. Memphis and Navy. I picked Navy in this game, and I want to change it, but I'm not going to. I already picked Memphis. They dropped 66. Brady White, who's a transfer, he threw for 358, 5 touchdowns in last week's games. But Navy, even though they lost their first game, they put up 41 points, and their quarterback Malcolm Perry had over 100 yards. This should be kind of a shootout. Both teams are good on offense, and I picked Navy, so I'm gonna stick with them. The North Carolina Tar Heels, they're taking on the East Carolina Pirates, or the ECU Pirates. Both teams lost. North Carolina lost a close game to a decent Cal team. East Carolina lost to a 1AA team, although the 1AA team they lost to went undefeated last season. And the quarterback for ECU was 37 of 65 for 309 yards. The quarterback for North Carolina had 4 interceptions. They did not look very good. That being said, I'm going with the Tar Heels to win this game. Next game, Wagner, 1AA team taking on the Syracuse Orange. Syracuse loaded up their first game. Their quarterback set the ACC record with rushing yards by quarterback in a game with 200 rushing yards. He passed for 184 and 2 touchdowns. He had 2 each. Passing and running, they should win this one pretty easily. The Kent State Golden Flashes against the 1AA Howard. Kent State almost beat Illinois, Big Ten team. Their quarterback for Kent State, Woody Barrett, he's a transfer from Auburn. He passed for 270 and 2 touchdowns and ran for 117 and a touchdown. Howard Bison has a quarterback by the name of Kalen Newton. And I talked about him in my reviews. And Kalen Newton, yes, that is Cam Newton's younger brother. And they almost beat a good MAC team in Ohio last week. Kalen Newton passed for 439 and 3 touchdowns and ran for 93 yards and a touchdown. So, Kent State better watch out. This could be, Howard could win. I picked Kent State. Both quarterbacks seem to be really good dual threat quarterbacks. Who knows? Maybe this is a shootout. I'm going Kent State, but watch out for Howard. 1AA Morgan State, they were taking on Akron. Akron, I didn't get to watch because their game, they were supposed to take on Nebraska, and that game got canceled. Akron, though, went 7-7 last year, won their side of the division in the MAC. They should be able to win this one. I got Akron. 1AA Lamar taking on Texas Tech. Texas Tech, that first game, they took on Ole Miss. They lost, but normally Texas Tech's offense can throw it all over the field. Their quarterback, they may be starting a freshman quarterback, and Alan Bowman, and he would pass for 273 and a touchdown against Ole Miss, which is a pretty good first game. He didn't start. McLean Carter started that game and then got hurt. But I think Texas Tech takes this one. Next game, 1AA Southern Illinois taking on Ole Miss. Ole Miss had a great first game against Texas Tech, which I just previously talked about. Ole Miss put up 47 in that game. Quarterback Jordan Ta'amu for Ole Miss passed for 336 and 2 touchdowns. Running back Scotty Phillips for Ole Miss ran for 204 yards and 2 touchdowns. I think Ole Miss takes that one pretty easy. Next game is East Tennessee State. 1AA East Tennessee State against the Tennessee Volunteers. Tennessee, they got slaughtered their first game against West Virginia, but I still got to go with Tennessee over the 1AA team. With that, the running back for Tennessee, Tim Jordan, did run for 118 yards last week, so maybe he has a good game again. North Dakota, 1AA taking on Washington. Washington lost a bit of a heartbreaker. They took on Auburn last week, both top 9 teams. They lost 21-16. Washington has one of the best teams in the country, period. Jake Browning at quarterback, he did throw for 296 and a touchdown. Miles Gaskin ran for 75 yards and a touchdown. Miles Gaskin ran for over 1,300 yards last year, in the last 3 years in a row, actually. Most people don't know about that. Washington wide receiver Aaron Fuller had 7 catches, 135 yards. This should not be close. Washington should run away with this one. All right, the Cy-Hawk game. This is an interesting rivalry. Iowa State from the Big 12 taking on Iowa Hawkeyes. Iowa State did not play last week. Their game got canceled because of weather. But normally, last year, their offense is pretty decent. They have basically 2 1,000-yard rushers back on their offense. So in 2015, Mike Warren rushed for 1,339 yards and 5 touchdowns. And then last year, David Montgomery rushed for 1,146 yards, 11 touchdowns. And Iowa's always good on defense. Their quarterback, Nate Stanley, he's a decent quarterback. He didn't have a good first game. I ended up going with Iowa in this game, but this could go. This was a tough pick. This could very well go either way. Savannah State 1AA taking on the Miami Hurricanes. Miami lost to LSU late on Sunday night. They did not look good at all, but they should correct that and come out with a pretty easy win against Savannah State. Youngstown State 1AA taking on West Virginia Mountaineers. West Virginia last week they killed Tennessee. Will Grier threw for well over 400 yards and 5 touchdowns. Youngstown State is a decent 1AA team, but West Virginia wins this. South Carolina State takes on UCF Knights. UCF should win this one easy. Mackenzie Milton last week, the quarterback for UCF, threw for 346 yards and 5 touchdowns. UCF's one of the best offenses in the country. They were number 1 last year in scoring offense, and they started off well this year as well with a 56-17 victory last week. They should win that pretty easy. All right, this is an interesting one. The Maryland Terrapins, they upset a ranked Texas team last week, and their quarterback, Kasim Hill, looked good. They take on Bowling Green from the MAC. Bowling Green did lose to Oregon 58-24, but their offense put up some points. Jarrett Dagey, the Bowling Green quarterback, passed for 253 and 3 touchdowns. They had a 100-yard rusher, and their receiver had 13 catches for 166 and 2 touchdowns. Maryland, Kasim Hill, he did really well as a quarterback on offense. They had a guy, Jashawn Jones. He threw a touchdown pass, caught a touchdown pass, and ran a touchdown. This is a sneaky game. I picked Maryland, but watch out for that. Bowling Green may come in and surprise them. So that Maryland should not look past them. All right, the next game, UMass Minutemen taking on the Georgia Southern Eagles. I picked Georgia Southern, but this one could go either way. UMass has a pretty good passing team. Their quarterback, Andrew Ford, he's a really good quarterback, and they have a really good receiver, Andy Isabella. Georgia Southern has a triple option team that's hard to stop. This was a coin flip. I went with Georgia Southern in this, but Georgia Southern ran for over 300 yards last week. But could be a pretty close game. Appalachian State Mountaineers, one of the best teams in the group of 5. They are taking on the Charlotte 49ers. Appalachian State went into Penn State, took them to overtime, almost won. Charlotte, they had a solid first game. But Appalachian State, man, their running game, their offense, their defense, their defense, yeah, they gave up 45, but it was Penn State. I don't see how Charlotte can win this game. But so Appalachian State, they should take that. 1AA Eastern Kentucky taking on Marshall. Marshall, they beat Miami of Ohio 35-28. Their quarterback threw for 272, 2 touchdowns. Their wide receiver, Tyree Brady, 116 yards, 2 touchdowns. Marshall should win pretty easy in that one. All right, this is one of the games of the day. Clemson Tigers going to College Station to take on the Texas A&M Aggies. Clemson, they have a quarterback, Kelly Bryant, who's in a competition with the #1 quarterback recruit in Trevor Lawrence. They both played well against 1AA team Furman. Trevor Lawrence had 3 touchdown passes in his first ever game. But Kelly Bryant had a touchdown pass as well. Their team did well. Texas A&M took out on a 1AA team last week. Kellen Mond passed for 184, 2 touchdowns. But here's the story. In my opinion, Travion Williams, the running back for Texas A&M, last week in the first half, he ran for 240 yards and 3 touchdowns. If they get him going against Clemson, Texas A&M could shock the world and upset Clemson. I'm picking Clemson mostly because the defensive line for Clemson, all 4 starters should and almost assuredly will be first round picks next year. All 4 of them, not just one, all 4. They have an NFL defensive line playing in college. To me, that's the difference in the game. If the A&M can handle their defensive line, watch out, world, because A&M's gonna win. Southeastern Louisiana, 1AA, taking on LSU. LSU looked great against Miami. They beat them 33-17. Their running back, Nick Brissett, ran for 125 yards and 2 touchdowns. This should be an easy win for LSU. 1AA, UT Martin, taking on Middle Tennessee State. Middle Tennessee State struggling against Vanderbilt, but I think they will correct it. Brent Stocks is one of the best quarterbacks in a group of 5. They will win this game, I believe. Southern, 1AA team taking on Louisiana Tech. Louisiana Tech usually is one of the better offenses in the country, if not the group of 5. Louisiana Tech is a really good team in this USA. All right, the UAB Blazers take on the Coastal Carolina Chanticleers. UAB, both of them have pretty interesting stories. I've told this multiple times, but about UAB making a bowl after not having a program for 2 years, and in Coastal Carolina, their coach was the CEO for TD Ameritrade. Blah blah blah. UAB, they looked really good in their first game. They dropped 52. I think I'm going with UAB in this one, but. Hey, if it's on TV, if you guys want to see it, it'll be on ESPN Plus. If you get it, watch it for a few minutes just to see that aqua field for Coastal Carolina, because it'll be in Conway, South Carolina, at Coastal Carolina's field. It's a cool looking field. Baylor Bears taking on the UTSA Roadrunners. Baylor had a good first game. They dropped 55. They have the transfer from NC State and Jalen McClendon, who's a good dual threat quarterback, all around kind of player. Baylor ran it at 200-yard rushers last week. I'm going with Baylor in that one. I don't think UTSA has much of a shot. Indiana State, 1AA, taking on the Louisville Cardinals. Louisville took their lumps against Alabama last week, but they should come back in this game. And Louisville, with Jawan Pass, the quarterback, he should have a good game in this one, and I expect Louisville to win. The Wyoming Cowboys from the Mountain West take on the Missouri Tigers and Drew Lock. Drew Lock had a good first game last week in the first half, passed for 29 and 4 touchdowns. I don't think Wyoming can really keep in this game. I think Wyoming may keep it close kind of early, maybe for a little bit, but I think Drew Lock kind of goes off a bit, and I think Missouri wins. 1AA Texas Southern taking on Texas State. Texas Southern, I think, is usually a pretty decent team in the 1AA. Texas State is not a very good team. A few years ago, they won like 7 games, but they look rough. Texas Southern could win. I'm picking Texas State Bobcats, but it might be one of those 1AA victories this week for Texas Southern. Florida A&M from the 1AA taking on Troy. Troy won 10 games last year. Troy lost last week, 56-20 to Boise State, but I think Troy they should bounce back. 1AA Stanford taking on the Florida State Seminoles. I'm a Gator fan. I don't like the Seminoles, but I gotta pick FSU. They shouldn't struggle with Stanford. 1AA Alabama State taking on Auburn. Auburn looked pretty good against Washington. Auburn's got a good defense, offense. They should handle this with no problem. 1AA Western Illinois taking on the Illinois Fighting Illini. Illinois, they started last week. They were down. They came back. They won. Illinois is trying to get to a bowl game, so any win for them is good for them. They should get win number 2 against the 1AA team. All right, so this is an interesting. Virginia Cavaliers, they have a transfer, Bryce Perkins. He had a good first game. They took on 1AA Richmond, but they dropped 42, and he had a good first game. The Indiana Hoosiers took on the Florida International Golden Panthers, and they beat them 38-28. I think this is even. I actually picked Indiana. I might regret that. I think Virginia might come out with that, but I'll stick with it, Indiana. The Arkansas Razorbacks taking on the Colorado State Rams. Arkansas Razorbacks, they have a new coach, Chad Morris. He knows how to move an offense. They probably will have. They started Cole Kelly last week at quarterback, but then Ty Story came in and wrote a new chapter in that book, and he had 3 touchdown passes, and he's expected to he probably will start this game. The Colorado State Rams, they're 0-2. They normally have a pretty good offense. They could keep it close, but I think Arkansas will win this one. The Florida Gators, take on Kentucky. Kentucky won the first game against Central Michigan. They struggled. They were down 17-7. They did end up winning 35-20. They had 2 running back go over 100. They have a pretty good running game. The Gators look really good in their first game. I know they played a 1AA team. Felipe Franks had 5 touchdown passes in that first game, and I'm picking the Gators to win this. The Utah Utes, they're taking on the Northern Illinois Huskies. Northern Illinois is usually one of the better teams in the MAC. Utah struggled a little bit last week before winning. They won 41-10, but they were down a bit. Running back for Utah ran for 150 yards. The quarterback ended up passing for 4 touchdowns and 253 yards. And I think Utah, that could be an upset. Northern Illinois got a shot, but I think Utah wins. All right, 1AA Maine taking on Western Kentucky. Western Kentucky, they lost big to Wisconsin, but Western Kentucky normally has a pretty good offense and should get things going, and I'm thinking they'll win that one. The Florida International Golden Panthers take on the Old Dominion Monarchs. FIU lost last week to Indiana, but they held their own. They only lost 38-28, and they were up a little bit in that game. And Old Dominion did not look good against Liberty last week at all. They lost 52-10. Florida International, I think they'll look pretty good. I think they will bounce back. Their quarterback, James Morgan, he actually transferred from Bowling Green. He had started a couple years ago, last year, the year before, and he should be pretty solid for them for the rest of the year. So I'm going with the FIU for that one. Incarnate Word taking on North Texas. North Texas is one of the better offenses. They have one of the better quarterbacks in a group of 5. Mason Fine, this should not be close. Mason Fine last week, 48-50, 444, 3 touchdowns. I think North Texas wins this one. Alright, one of the more interesting games, I feel like. Fresno State from the Mountain West, they're taking on the Minnesota Golden Gophers from the Big Ten. Fresno State dropped 79 points last week. Yes, 79. Minnesota looked good on offense last week as well. They dropped 48. They won 48-10 against New Mexico State. This will be back and forth, I believe. Fresno State is a bit of the underdog. I'm pulling the trigger with this one. I'm going to go Fresno State. Penn State and Indy Lions, in-state rivalry game against the Pitt Panthers. Penn State struggled against Appalachian State last week. They lost in overtime. Pittsburgh had a solid ho-hum kind of winning against one AA team. This could be an upset. Pitt has a shot. I'm going to go with Penn State. I think Trace McSorley would be a little bit too much. It's mostly that I think Pitt's offense isn't good enough to keep up with what Penn State could do. And Pittsburgh defense may hold Penn State down, maybe to below 30. I don't know, but I don't think Pittsburgh's offense is quite good enough to keep up. It could be a close game. The Tulsa Golden Hurricane taking on the Texas Longhorns. Tulsa struggled their first game against 1AA Central Arkansas. Tulsa normally has a pretty good offense. Texas was upset last week by Maryland. I think, Texas better not look past Tulsa and their offense, the potential of their offense. But I think Texas will bounce back from that loss, and I say they win this one. New Mexico State Aggies against the Utah State Aggies. New Mexico State Aggies, the first couple of games didn't look great. Utah State went into Michigan State, almost beat them, this close to an upset. Utah State, their quarterback Jordan Love, he looked really good against Michigan State. Their offense was able to move it pretty much up and down the field against a Michigan State defense, which is expected to be a really good defense. So I'm going Utah State for that. All right, the USA Jaguars, yes, South Alabama. They're taking on Oklahoma State Cowboys. Oklahoma State, Taylor Cornelius in his first game as a starter, even though he's a senior, all he did was pass for 295 and 5 touchdowns. Justice Hill, one of the best running backs in the country, ran for 122 yards and a touchdown. I don't think this is close. I think Oklahoma State wins pretty big. Nickel State, 1AA. They did get one of those upsets. They beat Kansas last week, and they take on the Tulane Green Wave. So this could be interesting. Tulane lost last week. They took Wake Forest to overtime. Tulane has a normally pretty balanced offense, running, passing. Their quarterback threw for 281 and 2 touchdowns last week. Their wide receiver, Taron Onkalad, had 8 catches, 189, 2 touchdowns. I think Tulane will take this. All right, 1AA Southern Utah taking on Oregon State. Oregon State Beavers. Ohio State moved it all over them. Oregon State lost 77-31. That being said, they did put up 31 points, and their offense looked pretty decent. And Southern Utah, 1AA team, I think Oregon State bounces back, and they should win this one. The Cincinnati Bearcats taking on Miami of Ohio Redhawks. Cincinnati was one of the interesting teams of the first week. They upset UCLA. After last year, Cincinnati was not very good at all on offense or anything. Their defense played well. Their running game, Michael Warren II ran for 142 and 3 touchdowns. He had a good game. Miami of Ohio, they lost to Marshall 35-28. Miami of Ohio has a pretty good quarterback in Gus Ragland. This could be a close game. It's an in-state rivalry, both in Ohio. Miami of Ohio is from the MAC. Cincinnati is in the American Athletic. This could be close. I'm picking Cincinnati. One of the games of the day, the USC Trojans take on the Stanford Cardinal. Both teams struggled last week. USC was down to UNLV at one point. They have a true freshman quarterback, JT Daniels, who came in and played pretty well. They have a really good wide receiver in Amon-Ra St. Brown. And Stanford, they beat San Diego State last week, 31-10. But Juwan Washington, the running back for San Diego State, ran for over 150 yards on him. Stanford struggled a lot of that game, especially with their running game, because Stanford has Bryce Love at running back, who finished second at Heisman last year, and he was held at 29 yards rushing. Now, the quarterback for Stanford, he stepped up. He had 332 passing yards and 4 touchdowns, but it was mostly to the wide receiver J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, who had 6 catches, 226, and 3 touchdowns. This is an interesting game. The talent level, experience-wise, goes to Stanford. KJ Costello's been there a couple years. Bryce Love has been there for years. Arcega-Whiteside's been there for years. USC has a true freshman at quarterback, quarterback, wide receiver. This game is even. I'm picking USC, but this game could go either way, and it depends on Bryce Love. If USC can shut down Bryce Love the way San Diego State did, USC has the talent at corner and defense to maybe slow down that Stanford passing game, and they're not known for passing. And San Diego State usually has one of the best defenses in the country. All right. UTEP Miners faced UNLV Rebels. UTEP went 0-12 last year and then got killed by a 1AA team last week, 30-10. UNLV, they lost to USC 43-21, but they were actually up in that game and they looked pretty good. The running back for UNLV ran for 136 yards. I'm picking UNLV to win this game. San Diego State Aztecs take on 1AA Sacramento State. San Diego State Aztecs, they played Stanford really tough last week. Juwan Washington, running back for San Diego State, ran for 158 yards and a touchdown, and I think they win. Boise State Broncos take on UConn Huskies. Boise State looked really good in their first game. Quarterback Brett Ripien for Boise State passed for 305 yards and 4 touchdowns. Their cornerback Tyler Horton had 2 fumble returns for touchdowns. UConn, they lost bad last week to UCF 56-17, but UConn's quarterback David Pindle passed for 270 yards and had well over 100 yards rushing. If UConn has a chance, it'll be because of him in this game. That game could actually come down to the wire. Maybe UConn gets an upset because Boise State is ranked actually, but I'm picking Boise State. The California Golden Bears take on the BYU Cougars. This is a good game. California beat North Carolina last week. They didn't look very good, but they won. BYU upset the Arizona Wildcats. BYU's defense held Arizona's offense down really well. This is a game I'm picking Cal, but this is a coin flip game. One of the best games of the day. Michigan State Spartans go into the Arizona State Sun Devils. I'm picking Arizona State to upset Michigan State. Michigan State struggled against Utah State last week. They have a pretty good quarterback. They got a good team. Their defense is supposed to be good, but Utah State and their offense moved up and down the field. And Arizona State has a really good quarterback in Manny Wilkins and a really good offense. They dropped 49 last week. I'm going with Arizona State. I think they upset. I think San Jose State Spartans take on the Washington State Cougars. San Jose State Spartans, they lost to a 1AA team. They suck. Washington State, they have a quarterback, Gardner Minshew, who's a graduate transfer from Eastern Carolina. And in his first game, he passed for 319 yards, 3 touchdowns. He couldn't have that the first half, and they win. I think they roll. The last game of the day, Rice Owls take on the Hawaii Rainbow Warriors. Rice, they looked bad their first game against a 1AA team, even though they won. They looked better against a good Houston Cougars team, even though they lost. Hawaii, their offense has looked unstoppable. They went back to the run and shoot. Their quarterback, Cole McDonald, he had 6 touchdown passes last week for Hawaii. They got 2 or 3 receivers on that Hawaii team. That quarterback could have 4 or 5 touchdowns by halftime. Rice may keep it close for like a quarter, but I think Hawaii, they blow this one out. They blow them out. So those are my previews for this next week's game. I know it's a little bit quick. I kind of talked a little bit fast, but you know, I did my picks and I felt like they weren't as in depth as they should be, and hopefully this will satiate some of your appetites. If you wanted to know a little bit more, now you know every single team and every single game. So go check out our YouTube channel, Fan of Football 813. My sister started a Twitter handle. Go check that out. And peace.